how can they hear if we haven't gone online and that's the only place they're going to find church? So it just reading that this morning and knowing that this seminar was coming up really encouraged me to think, actually, it is our call to go to where the people are at, and nowadays they're online.
We can't actually stream what we do normally on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And people are saying, oh, but we don't want to lose it, do we? So I wanted to crack that mindset so that actually we are a more outward-looking worshipping community that can then find ways to engage more deeply with our community.
You know, let's not fall into the trap of just going back and doing what we were doing before. Absolutely everything is up for discussion. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Do we want to do this again? We often joke about, wouldn't it be lovely to shut everything down for a term and just take a really long look at what we're doing and why we're doing it? Actually, we've just been able to do that.
The first person that we are going to chat to is Amy Key. Hi, Amy. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hiya.
So, Amy, do you want to just tell us who you are for anyone who hasn't met you or doesn't know you?
Sure. I'm at St Augustine's in Ipswich, and I'm the curate. I've just started my second year of curacy there.
Great, thank you. So can you tell us a bit about what you guys have been doing over at St Augustine's online during this time, just to give people some context if they haven't seen what you've been up to?
Sure. We've tried to do a lot of experimenting with a few different ways of doing things online. Some of it's worked really well, some of it really hasn't worked at all. But that's kind of the nature of having to shift everything online, I think. We've had, from the start of lockdown, weekly morning Bible studies going up for people to just tune into and start their day. We've had kids, like a kids story time on Saturday morning. That was one of the things that wasn't working out so well. So we've kind of turned that into, that's a kids Zoom now, which is working a lot better. The youth have been doing a similar thing and having games and hangout time like that. We've obviously had Sunday morning, we've been kind of streaming out as live services, but that's had lots of different people participating, lots of different segments of video. And then we've tried a few things like socials, like quiz nights and acoustic nights and things like that as well. And we've managed to run an online alpha course too, which went a lot better than I thought it would to start with. I was very sceptical about that one, but alpha worked really well online too.
Awesome. And can you tell us a bit about what you've been noticing in terms of, those things that you've been offering? What has that opened up for you in terms of people being able to engage with you at this time?
So if I just start with alpha, as I said, I was a bit sceptical about how it would work. If anyone is unfamiliar with alpha, a big part of it is that you get together as a group and have a meal together, and you kind of build those relationships over the course of a few months. And I wasn't sure how well that would work over Zoom, only being on a tiny little screen. Actually, what we found is that we had more people sign up to this alpha than we've had before. And there were people who signed up who don't live anywhere near Ipswich, so wouldn't have been able to come physically. But we also had people who were a bit unsure about walking through church doors. So for them to be able to kind of glimpse alpha online was really handy. And we've kind of had that with services as well. People can sneak in online, no one knows they're there. They can stay for 5-10 minutes, the whole thing, and then kind of back away again. And it's kind of like our shop front, so people can see what we're about. They can catch a glimpse of what church might look like. That hopefully would give them a bit more confidence to come on a Sunday morning as well. I think on top of that, we've also realised, and something that we should have realised years ago, there are whole communities of people who can't physically get to church for whatever reason, whether that's work, whether that's a physical disability that stops them being able to leave the house. And actually the church hasn't, for the most part, been there in the same capacity as we've been there physically on a Sunday morning.
That's so interesting. So how is that informing the kinds of questions that you're asking as you look ahead into maybe the next few months and then maybe even further down the road than that?
Yeah. So a really big question that we're asking as a team is, how do we not abandon this online community that we've kind of put ourselves in? A lot of these people have been online before, waiting for the church to get there, I suppose. So how do we not abandon that community that we've started to build online, but how can we kind of merge perhaps a Sunday morning service along with an online service? What does that look like to have those two working hand in hand? How does that work without compromising what a gathered church looks like and what the body of Christ looks like? So it's a lot of questions about that. God is clearly doing something online, so it's important that we don't just back away and go back to doing what we were doing before. At St Augustine's, what we were doing before is we were uploading the sermon after the service so it could be listened to as a podcast, but that was all that's going up there. But actually, people want to be able to participate in a whole service. We need to be thinking about what more can we do to put up there. But it's also not as simple. I don't think it's also as simple as just sticking a camera at the back of church and live streaming it, because I don't think that does justice to the community who are watching online. So at the moment, we're trying to figure out how do we make sure that the content is really good, that it's kind of similar teaching, consistent quality. And at the moment, that looks a bit like a hybrid service, I suppose, where we might have some pre-filmed that gets shown online and in the church when we're physically in the church space. It might look like having bits of it live, and those bits are live streamed, but really, really working on our audio quality and our video quality to make sure that's really good. And then how do we kind of socially interact with those two different groups of people? There's some really big questions there.
Yeah, but great questions. Let's back up then a little bit from those very, there's so much sort of practically to be worked out there. If I could get like your big picture of kind of where St Augustine's was before COVID-19 was ever on our radar, and if you looked ahead maybe to 2021, what do you think are going to be the kind of big defining differences between, or what would you like to see?
I'd love to see a church that kind of is continuing to grow in what we do with technology. Technology is a part of society. We can't get away from that. And the church is called to go and be where people are. And a lot of people on Sunday mornings are lying in bed on Facebook. So, the church needs to be aware of that and be doing something to reach those people who are on social media rather than kind of coming into church. I'd love to see a team of people who are really passionate about using technology, who are really gifted in technology, kind of training people up to get excited about how we can reach people who aren't physically coming to church. I'd like us to be really open to where God is leading us, to be using technology in worship, and I'd like to see it done well. I think that's a big part of what I think that worship should be about, is that it's excellent and glorifying to God, and not just the kind of what we can muster, but I'd like to see us grow in how we can do that really well.
Wow, that's exciting. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. We've got a question straight off in the chat from David Gill. Thank you for commenting that. Who are the people in these online communities? Are they local, international? What are you seeing?
We've seen it all over. I think in the beginning it was a lot more diverse. Now it's kind of plateaued a bit, and I think a lot of people are seeing that across the country. But we have had a lot of people local to Ipswich, a lot of people local to Suffolk who are a bit further than Ipswich. We've had people across the UK, but then we've even had some people kind of as far as New Zealand and Mongolia. I think we had some views from, and America as well. We've had some connections there. I guess a lot of those are people who are perhaps connected to St Augustine's, who have shared it on their feeds and things like that. So they've had friends or family from those countries tune in. But that's how the online world works. There are no kind of geographical boundaries. Anything is possible, any distances.
Did anyone else want to jump in with any questions? You can just unmute yourself if you would like to do so.
Hi, I was just about to type a question in, but I will ask it. And that's simply that you're saying, right, we go online, which our parish does. It goes online, 2 services on a Sunday morning and other things in the week. But if you're going to deliver online, do we need to have all those different churches delivering online? Or are we simply saying we need to have one big mega church who are delivering the online worship?
I think that's a really, really interesting concept, isn't it? To perhaps have like a deanery online church or a diocesan online church. It would certainly save some of the workload, wouldn't it, if we could spread it around like that. I think part of what it is each, you could just say, well, people have cars now, parish boundaries are a bit redundant. Why don't we just have one deanery church that kind of covers it all? But I think that's, in the Anglican Church, the beauty of it is we have these really broad traditions and lots of different things going on. And how we do our online service will be really different from how the church down the road does their online service. And part of that is tradition and breadth in tradition. And also different people tuning in, different styles of worship will appeal to different people as well. I think it's important that we have a range and that everyone can do what they do really well online to really be honouring of those different styles of worship too.
Absolutely. I guess that's the beauty of being part of a deanery, and something that is exactly at the heart of what these workshops are about as well, that we realise that we don't all have to do everything, because we are partnered together in sharing out the commission to help people in Ipswich find God. And so yeah, that's great. Did anyone else have any more questions before we move on? Amy, thank you so much. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, this morning I was reading from Romans 10. I just read the passage that I read this morning. How then can they call on the one they've not believed? And how can they believe in the one whom they've not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And, to add a bit to that, how can they hear if we haven't gone online and that's the only place they're going to find church? So just reading that this morning and knowing that this seminar was coming up really encouraged me to think, actually, it is our call to go to where the people are at, and nowadays they're online. So it's our responsibility as a church to look at how we can do that.
Thank you so much. We're going to go to chat to Mary now. Mary, would you like to just introduce yourself again to those who don't know you?
Helps if I unmute myself.
Yeah.
Mary Sacrament. I'm priest in charge at Witton with Thelston and Aiken on the northwest of the deanery.
Fab. Thanks so much for being with us today. I'd love for you to share just a bit about what's been going on with the Witton parish churches during lockdown. I've certainly enjoyed tuning in to some of the things you've been up to on Facebook. So I'd love for you to just share a bit for those who don't know.
Thank you. Okay, I think a little bit of background is really important, because I think we started from a very, very, very low base. And I think perhaps that's quite important in encouraging others. We started off where I had one extremely ropey microphone in the church. That's the limit of our tech, full stop. You stick the microphone in your pocket, nobody twiddles any knobs, it's set at a range, and that's what it's set at, in a cupboard somewhere in the vestry. So I think it's important to know where we started. So as soon as lockdown started, I felt what's needed at the moment, and we have our Facebook page, which is a public page. My first instinct was that people were anxious. And so the first thing I wanted to do was something that might help that anxiety, particularly perhaps for those who were alone later in the day. And so I began streaming an online traditional language compline service with a bit of a daily examen in it as a way of just easing people at the end of the day. And it really wasn't with any other agenda than to offer people something in that sort of crisis situation. That's continued to have a very good following, if you believe the numbers, and I never know how we make head nor tail of those, but we have roughly 60 people an evening, and we do it at 9 o'clock every evening. It's a short service with a bit of a reflection. I do it sometimes, Maureen does it sometimes, and I'm now expanding the team to do that. And that's been quite popular. And it was simple, straightforward. I sat in my conservatory and I streamed straight, with no microphone, no anything else, straight into my iPad. Sunday mornings were a little bit more of a challenge, and partly because we had no technology, and partly because what do you do when you've got a congregation who are incredibly elderly, who are not all online by any means. So it had to be a mixed approach. So I began a very simple online service, and I wanted something that didn't cause me a headache every week. Because it's only me, I don't have anyone else to help with tech or anything. I've got no technicians, I've got no whizzy people. I've found one that's just come out of the woodwork. So that was a bit of a challenge, and so I wanted something quite sort of simple. So I've been using The Word for All Seasons by David Graham, which provides a weekly service sheet for each week of the year, which you can download from the CD once you've bought the book. Very straightforward, very simple. Music is a really key part of our worship. How was I going to do that? My organist has been spectacular, and has been providing initially just some piano music that he sung to, but that's grown and grown. So I now sit in my conservatory on a Sunday morning and on an evening for Compline with a small 4-channel mixing desk, my iPad, my iPhone, a playlist on my iPhone which I stream into my iPad, and do a very simple service. And now Rob has managed to get the choir singing, and he mixes the music on Garage, and we have music in the worship as well. The service sheets and everything else are made available by email to everybody, but also mostly on our website as well. Most weeks we have a little bit of an issue now and again. It's basically a very short service of the word, a short homily and 3 hymns and some music, and allowing people, because it's live streamed, it's really interactive, so people are putting up comments and I'm replying and I'm talking to the people. Likewise with Amy, we have a very wide audience, Thailand, Canada, Australia. It's been really lovely to see my organist's wife being able to worship with her mum who's in Australia, so they're online together and they know that, things like that. And again, a very, very good number of people engaging with it, but how long they stay, who knows. But also, because of the large quantity of people not online, I've been posting the same resources out every week to those who don't have internet. So they get everything. They get a letter from me, the same as everybody else. They get all the service sheet and what the hymns are going to be, and then they can find them if they've got them. I've now just started with the music that Rob sent, sending them out a CD of all the music from the last couple of months, so they can at least hear what we've been doing, particularly as our young children are singing now, and Rob's doing that. And what's made all that possible, I think that's important actually, is a lot of that is Rob, my music director, being adventurous, and my son, who's been able to talk me through the kit to buy. It's all cost under £100, how to use it, how to set it up, and what I'm doing. So I've had to kind of get expertise from where I could, and I think a lot of churches might be in a similar place.
Yeah.
So I haven't got young whizzy people in my congregation that could do it for me. So that's what we've been doing, and we're now online each day putting. We've always, as a parish, had a prayer directory. So that's the prayer directory. And each day we pray for people in the congregation, but also the wider community. And we're now putting that up each morning so people in the different roads and the different parts of the community know we're praying. And that's been a good outreach as well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it just sounds like you've been doing so much, Mary, and it's amazing.
Well.
it must feel amazing for you to be rattling off that list, really.
It's been a journey. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
And so it's and each week it gets better. You know, I started off with just Rob, and now I've got all of the choir singing parts, and he mixes them together. You know, it's been a lot of hours. It's 12 hours a week.
Wow. So from all of that, then we're looking into kind of this new sort of transition phase now. Buildings can start to open back up. What of what you have been doing are you and your learning community perhaps looking at maybe taking forward into this new stage that we're in now, if at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think some of the things that we've achieved with what we've done has been the outreach, same as everybody else, I think, and people logging in that we wouldn't know, a way of experimenting. it's kept the habit of going to church for my congregation, because they get up and they log on and they go to church. I even have a lot of people ringing me up and say, well, I get dressed up on a Sunday. But I equally have people who say I'm online in my pajamas, so that's fine. So that's been good, and I want to sort of be able to take that forward for those who cannot get to church. So what I've done is I've diverted my learning community, because there's not much that they could be getting on with in terms of some of our aims. So they've now been diverted. So they are the key group that are now looking at what we do now, what we want to do. We've got the kit list we need to upgrade everything, so it's all possible. So we've got all the kit lists, we've got it all budgeted, we've got the budget done, and we've now applied for a grant for it under the COVID grant stuff. But it's also changed the way we're looking at how our North Isle project and what we can do there, and how the facilities we want will enable the community to both use them, so we can begin to stream into a lot of our residential homes. We can begin to stream to other communities. So our Wicked children's choir group, when they do a performance, we can stream that into our residential accommodation. We can allow people to use that equipment, so any activities they want to do in our buildings, all three of them, because it's portable, so anything they want to do in the three buildings, they can stream out to people, so engage the community more as well. So I'm hoping to really use that as part of the reaching out that we do with the learning community, and blending those two together. And the learning community working on how we segue into all of that at the moment. So that's where we are really. And we've had 2 meetings of the learning community to talk about it. I've got another one next week. We're looking at service plans, we've done the tech side, and we've got, hopefully if we can get the funding, that'll be good, that'll be helpful to upgrade everything in both buildings actually.
Great. So I'd love for you, just as we wrap up, for you to just share, like, what are your big hopes for what it might look like for people to be able to engage, perhaps for the first time in Witham Parish, or people who have congregation?
I think my hopes are that people will be able to explore faith in a non-threatening way, and therefore see that, you know, we don't have 2 heads, and that they can come into the church building. Online is great, but it is not church, and I'm pretty clear about that. It is not church. We gather for church when we can, and so it's that hoping to make that stepping stone, but also for those who can never get to church, and that's a reality that we know about. Fair enough, and that's fine. But I want it to be something that changes our mindset from looking at what we do every Sunday as the same thing. We had no variation in our diet at all. But this has made people think we can't actually stream what we do normally on a Sunday. And people are saying, oh, but we don't want to lose it, do we? So I want it to crack that mindset, so that actually we are a more outward looking worshipping community that can then find ways to engage more deeply with our community.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. FJ, I see your blue hand. You're on mute currently, if you are. Yeah.
I just wanted publicly to thank Mary for a very early example of learning from others, when she told me that the way in which she shared the piece electronically was to invite people to send each other messages of peace. That would never have occurred to me, so thank you, Mary.
Thank you. I also do that. I also actually do that in our prayer time. So before we have formal prayers, I have a piece of quiet music, and I invite people to put prayers up on the screen that they want to pray for, but reminding them that it is in the absolute public domain, so confidentiality is important.
We've got some fantastic questions in the chat, which raise some more of maybe some of the theological questions that we are all facing at the moment. Firstly, I'm thrilled that they've come up, because we are about to come on to some of those when we chat with Mark. Did anyone have specific questions? Oh, it's all coming. Okay, so let's go with FJ's, for example. He's put in the chat, how can the sacraments be conveyed online? Do you have thoughts on that, Mary, first of all?
Well, I haven't been doing sacraments. It's been a service of the word, and that's really interesting because we are a completely sacramental church.
Yeah.
That challenged me a lot. I did a communion service once, which I live streamed. It was the most bereft feeling I've ever felt in my life. I've only did it once and I wasn't doing it again. My congregation didn't particularly want me to do so, but I thought it's important to experience it before we make, absolute decisions. I think the Eucharist is about kenosis, and it is a thing of the moment. And certainly I wouldn't, if I had to live stream it, I wouldn't download it. Mm-hmm. For people to watch later. That kind of theologically doesn't feel right in my head. Mm-hmm. It is a thing where we are gathered at that time, and I think the sacraments present us with the biggest challenge of all. What do we do when people are not going to be able to come back to church or don't feel comfortable to? How can they receive the Eucharist? Mm. I'll be honest with you, spiritual communion doesn't do it for me. Mm-hmm. But theologically there are issues. I have heard of an example of somebody inviting all the congregation back, but they're not going to receive communion. Only the priest will. They'll receive spiritual community even though they're in that building, and I find that challenging. So there are a lot of perspectives, but for me communion is of the moment. And it's a gathered thing, so I think it is a real challenge. It is difficult, and I'm hoping, somewhere against hope, that the wider church is grappling with some of this theology and grappling with some of what does it mean to gather for the Eucharist. Is our gathering online real, and if so, how does somebody online receive the Eucharist other than spiritual communion? Because that doesn't kind of work either. So I think we're in very, very struggling water here.
FJ, did you want to share something on that as well, or did anyone else want to come in on that particular question around, say, for example, the Eucharist?
Yeah, Bex, can I just say something about it?
Yeah, do.
I'm a bit of a radical on these sort of issues. I'm sort of looking at things in a practical context. So while I'm in an urban church, I'm thinking, right, a lot of the issues we have around rural churches is lots of buildings, priests trying to dash from one to the other. So my thinking was along the lines of, do we actually need a physical presence? I know theologically there'll be lots of things, but I'm just going very simple, not going into any arguments. Simply that God is spirit, first thing. Therefore, spirit, not physical. We have this thing as priests that we actually say, we don't consecrate necessarily everything on the table. So therefore we can actually be selective in saying, oh, no, I didn't mean to consecrate that, therefore it's not consecrated. So I would twist it around the other way. If I were here, wherever I happen to be, and I was linking with St. Mary's churches in Britain, if I knew someone of responsibility was there and we knew they'd pre-arranged to have the sacraments there on an altar, my logic would say, well, if I cannot consecrate something on this altar, equally I can consecrate something on another elsewhere. And equally I would think if you had something online within people's individual houses, you knew what was happening, therefore, you could say that would be consecrated. And you may well say, well, the theological reasons why it shouldn't be, but actually the person receiving it, if they surely felt that bread and wine, even if it's in their front room, had been consecrated, then you've got that side of things. It's radical, there's lots of thinking to go about it, but so I start from a practical position of, we've now learned to use technology. Could we also use it to avoid priests running backwards and forwards across muddy footpaths in rural Suffolk?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Merv. Rhiannon's just commented in the chat, there are bishops' guidelines on the Eucharist, and the National Church of England have been releasing guidelines on the Church of England website as well. I think this raises some really interesting questions, and it's great that they're actually coming out already. Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing with us. We're going to head over to Mark. Mark, I was about to ask you about whether you had joined this sort of galactic empire, but you seem to have returned to your study now.
But I'd better be mature if I'm
No, don't change.
Time to grow up.
No, don't do that.
Do you mind, first of all, just introducing yourself for anyone who doesn't know you?
Yeah, I'm Mark. I'm the minister over on the east side of town, St. John's and St. Andrews and Bixley Farm. We're just a united parish now, so that's where we're based.
Great. So I think something that's just happened in the chat and in that conversation we've just had has set the stage really nicely for some of the things I'd love to chat to you a bit about. Yeah. It feels like there's kind of two things going on in this season. One is that the church has been noticing by and large that there are new people that seem to be able to engage with them in new ways at this time, that in some sense we're able to connect with people in ways we haven't been able to before.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's also this tangible feeling that there's something missing, that whilst we're not physically gathered, there is something that we long for as church that we're not able to kind of reach in this season. I would love for you to just maybe tease out those two things for us and what you have, your reflections on that over the season and how that has related, and practically speaking at MIE, what has that looked like? If that's not too much of a starter question.
Yeah, that's 15 minutes gone right there, isn't it? We've worked really hard at doing stuff online over the lockdown period, and we've been able to devolve out a lot of stuff to a lot of different people, and really during the lockdown period, our attitude has been, let's just try as much as we possibly can. A bit like Amy was saying earlier on, if stuff doesn't work, we've just shut it down again pretty quickly. And so we've had online services, which we've then burned onto DVDs and CDs afterwards, and then taken around to people who don't have access to the internet. We've been doing a load of stuff on Facebook, live at 3 every day at its height during lockdown. We would just have a little 10-minute slot, different people from the church sharing their testimony, just reflecting as Christians. We've done messy church online in a kind of Blue Peter style crafts and stuff, alpha. We've done Zoom prayer meetings, blogs, videos. We've kept our youth groups going. We've done social stuff. I've been sending out emails on MailChimp throughout the whole thing. So we've really tried to embrace the opportunities around lockdown. But I think some of the questions that are coming up, I think for us have become increasingly pertinent as that whole period has gone on, in terms of becoming increasingly aware of what we've been missing and what we've been losing while we've been meeting online, and saying, while we have to meet online, let's do that and let's push it. But that there is this sense of the physicality of church, and the fact that actually we are embodied beings, and things like sacraments, things like even preaching, and what does it mean to talk about things like sacrament and preaching as means of grace, and the Spirit at work in that, fellowship, how do we serve one another, just those relational questions that we have. And so probably less optimistic than maybe one or two others about how much of church and of mission, of evangelism can be done online, and being aware that if we are doing it online, we're impoverishing things somehow as well. So it's been a real battle for us, I think. We've tried to do as much as we can online, but as soon as lockdown is over, we're already trying to get as much as we can back offline. Keeping enough online. I think what Amy was saying earlier about giving people a taste or a shop window into who we are and what we're doing, we're going to try to keep enough online to do that. But actually, we're inviting people into the body of Christ, and into the worship of the people of God. And I think that's become increasingly poignant for us.
And how does with that desire to reintroduce some form of physical gatherings, do you have current thoughts about some kind of approach that you can take to that, and what you're prioritizing moving forward, with numbers being what they are physically, in terms of physical gathering at the moment, and with church buildings being able to reopen? Are there things that you're kind of prioritizing in order to get people back in the room together?
Well, yeah, I mean, we had our first service on the 5th of July, so we're working hard on this, and we're opening St Andrews this coming Sunday as well, actually. And I mean, what we're trying to do is keep the service at the moment the same format that we were doing our online service to, and that does introduce constraints in terms of what we're then able to do in a service, but we've kind of said, you know what, that it's worth it for being able to meet together again in worship, while keeping things accessible for people who aren't able to be in the building, or who aren't ready yet to be in the building. We find that kind of mixed economy is helping us get through that transition period.
Can I ask what you guys are up to in terms of small groups and in exploring faith courses and things like that at the moment?
Yeah, we ran a couple of alpha courses online. I think, a bit like Amy was saying, I think they went better than we thought they were going to, and we had an international clientele in one of them, which was very, very strange to navigate, but a lot of fun, and actually finding that once people got used to the dynamics of engaging online and through Zoom, that actually the conversations were pretty good, actually, and really constructive and helpful. But again, I think our hope would be that we would be inviting people into something that was offline as well. Yeah. In terms of like home groups and fellowship groups, as many of those as we've been able to get to operate during Zoom, through Zoom or whatever, Google Hangouts, we've been doing that. But again, as soon as we've been able to, where it's possible, we've been getting people back offline again and meeting as much as they can physically.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to just share with us your hopes for, say, later on in the year. What is that going to look like when people are able to physically gather again? And what is that thing that we have been missing that perhaps people will be able to discover who have maybe connected with us online and then are joining us in the room for the first time? What are you hoping that thing that we're going to find? Are we going to find a new lease of life in those physical gatherings?
I hope so. I mean, we've had a lot of enthusiasm from people coming back, and a real sense of joy and celebration at being able to meet together for worship. So I think just at a very sort of emotional, human level, it's just people are really having a blast being together again. Even if you can't like sing and stuff, they're just enjoying being in the same room and able to talk to each other. So that's been really refreshing. I mean, one of the things as we come out of lockdown is we are asking about absolutely everything we do. You know, let's not fall into the trap of just going back and doing what we were doing before. Absolutely everything is up for discussion. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Do we want to do this again? We often joke about, wouldn't it be lovely to shut everything down for a term and just take a really long look at what we're doing and why we're doing it? Actually, we've just been able to do that. And so just asking and just interrogating every aspect of our life in ministry and saying, right, as this comes back, you know, into action, what are we doing? What are we hoping for? What were we not happy with before? How can we fix that now that we've got this opportunity to restart things, as it were, from a much more neutral blank sheet of paper kind of starting point? Yeah. So we're being quite ruthless with ourselves. My hope is that one of the things that will have happened is that we will have recognized how much we appreciate things that perhaps we were taking for granted before. Not having had the opportunity to meet for worship for 3 or 4 months might just make us sit back and go, you know what, I really missed that. That was far more important to me than I realized. And that there would be a sort of a fresh kind of recommitting of ourselves to the body of Christ, to worship, to sacraments together, to doing prayer together, to fellowshipping together. Just because we didn't have it for a while, we missed it. We realized it was important. We understood that God was doing things through our physical being together that maybe we weren't aware of before or hadn't registered. but we in the absence of it, we realize now that there was stuff that was important.
That's brilliant. I think so much of that will resonate with so many people here. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Do people have questions or comments off the back of that? Feel free to pop your hand up if you'd like to. We've got a few things going on in the chat. Rhiannon's stealing lots of your quotes. No. We've got, okay, so there's a couple of questions here which perhaps we can open out to everyone, which is about those people who have perhaps been shielding at this time, or are in maybe more of a vulnerable category, and what sort of provision perhaps we want to be making for those people. Did you want to comment on that, Mark, or we can open it out to wider?
Yeah, I mean, just very, very quickly, in terms of people who are still shielding, I mean, we're just working really hard at making sure that people aren't feeling under obligation to come to services because they're now happening. Everything we're doing is being live streamed and recorded, so it's available on the website afterwards. And again, DVDs and CDs of those recordings are being made and are being taken out to people who don't have access through the internet and stuff. So again, we're just, like, for us, I think churches, we one of the things that we've worked hard at is helping people try to stay connected with the corporate life and mission of the church, and we don't want to lose that now. So there's a lot of work going on in terms, we're using the phrase mixed economy, and just trying to keep everyone as connected as possible.
Yeah, great. Did anyone else want to come in on that one? I love what Alan has just put in the chat. It's good to see this as a God-given opportunity to take stock and be ruthless, as Mark says. I think we can't go back to how it was and somehow need a mixed economy. I think that's the great thing that goes on again in a workshop like this, is that we can see that people will be taking different approaches. But yeah, that opportunity to step back and rethink. How are churches addressing the potentially much broader range of Christian knowledge / experience that could be attending an online service? Does anyone have thoughts on that question from Karen in the chat? How are churches addressing the potentially much broader range of Christian knowledge or experience that could be attending an online service? Karen, do you have your own comments on that?
I'm thinking particularly about people who may be just coming to have a glimpse, coming to have a first look. I mean, we've been in lockdown and now coming out of lockdown for a while. So if people are interested, they've possibly been hanging on the fringes for a while. But I'm quite aware that we can quite easily fall into churchese or jargon that is very familiar, or liturgy and routines that are very familiar to those of us that are regularly participating in church. I don't know the answer, and although from my own the church family I belong to is at Colchester Road, and I know that we've started this idea of having 2 different type of Zoom options, so that those who are new or just looking have got the option of connecting with somebody if they've got questions or things that they don't understand. So just thinking about how to differentiate from your regulars from those who are shopping or window shopping or browsing. Just a thought.
So there's some fascinating questions coming out of this. We're going to go into breakout rooms for a few minutes. And I think please do feel free. There are some questions that we put together for these breakout rooms, but if there are things that are coming out of these interviews as well that you would like to pick up on and perhaps are more comfortable talking about in a smaller group or anything like that, please do feel free to interject your own thoughts based on the interviews that we've just had, because they've drawn out some really valuable questions. Let's go first to Andy. Do you want to just give us a couple of things that were going on in your room?
Yeah, that's great. A couple of things are coming out. One of the things that people noticed was people identifying their skills or other people identifying their skills. So people who perhaps wouldn't usually do something, having the opportunity to do it, to kind of do a talk online or a Facebook Live, or kind of just really the rise of the techies, because actually how important they be in this time. And that certainly came out. A couple of things that people are hoping to continue are people are hoping to do some videos online or something that is kind of that shop window. People talking about how hearing stories of people who would never usually go to church, sitting down and watching it with their spouse, for example, or someone else. So that's something people are keen to carry on. Quizzes, even though quizzes have kind of tailed off as Zoom fatigue has kind of hit, people think that actually maybe once we actually get back to a normal, some kind of new normal, a Zoom quiz might be a really good thing. And lastly, what are people kind of really hoping their churches will focus on? One person said they really hope that all of us really, that we look outwards rather than inwards, and that was a really good thing to finish on.
Awesome, thank you. Bob, are you happy to share with us what went on in your room?
Yeah, question 3 was the one that really got us talking. So question 1, we thought, it's been very creative, really creative time. And then we moved on to question 2, and we all just agreed that there needed to be a change and more hybrid, online and physical, in the new normal. And then number 3, we had a really big discussion, and we were saying that prayer attendance was up on online meetings, but we'd like to translate that into, physical meeting. Pastoral care has been really impressive, and people getting to know each other who perhaps didn't know each other, learning names and things like that. People have been taking risks a bit more and trying different things, not being scared to fail. But we thought that the physicality of meeting in person was something you can't replace, and it actually creates a lot of important discussions and issues because of that, and like we've been talking about already. So we're quite interested in that, because the message can be shaped by the medium, and how are we changing the gospel when we're meeting online, and how, because we're not meeting physically. That was something they raised. And the last thing, someone said they'd reconnected with their calling, which having this time has been really good just to reflect, and I think that is a real positive from it.
Great, thanks, Bob. Over in our room, we had some good conversations straight off the back of the interviews that have just taken place. Still got some big questions around things like the Eucharist. Definitely the desire to be back physically together was something that was pretty shared by everybody. Some joy expressed in the level of connection that's been found at this time. So being able to connect and interact with people, first of all, those who don't necessarily have the ability to access physically a church service, also that kind of more frequent engagement throughout the week and that sort of thing. We had a great comment from FJ about the fact, and I'm going to paraphrase you actually, and please do tell me if I've put words into your mouth, but actually I think an interesting point that he raised is that often when we talk about the online, we drift into perhaps kind of a consumer language about, well, what are we giving to people? And actually FJ said, well, sort of what are we giving to God, and what does worship to God look like at this time? And I just love that actually maybe the best thing that will come out of this workshop is some really good questions, and I know probably a lot of us are desperate for answers but sometimes a good question is I would say 70% of the way there to some good answers. So I really hope that's been useful to you. We will be doing another workshop next month, and we're going to get back to a few more of the maybe practical concerns next month. What I'm hoping to offer is a workshop on midweek engagement. We're going to call it Engaging Online When You Don't Have the Time, because we know that if you do want to sustain some things online, there's going to be some time pressures as you look to restart some of the stuff that you've been doing physically. And then there's also some questions about, is live streaming a Sunday service the way to go? Amy's made some great points about maybe what that might look like going forward. So we're going to be talking a bit about how we can use some of the social media stuff midweek to engage people and point them towards those physical gatherings that we're all so desperate to get back to. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you so much to Amy and to Mary and to Mark for sharing with us. Yes, clap emojis happening all over the shop, which we love. I'm going to finish with this great quote that FJ has just dropped in the chat. Answers are temporary, questions are eternal. Write it on your walls, if you will. Thank you so much for being with us. Take care. God bless you all as you plan and prepare for whatever this season brings. And do get in touch with us. You can drop us an email at inspiring.ipswich@cofsuffolk.org if you would like to talk more with us, or if you want to register your interest for a future workshop. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Bex.
Thank you, Bex.
Thanks, Catherine.